What's up, everybody? FTWitachi here. You know what it is. Thank you all very much for tuning in to another World of Warcraft Warlock guide for Shadowlands. Today we're going to be going over Soulbinds. We have recently released our Demonology, Affliction, and Destruction guide that has been updated with the latest patch of 9.0.2. We've also released our updated guide for Covenants as well. In regards to Covenants, there are also Soulbinds that are tied in with these Covenants. Each covenant has 3 different soulbinds that you can go ahead and soulbind your character with, which is what we're going to be going through on every single one. And then after the end, we're going to be going over which one you should be selecting for either Affliction, Destruction, and Demonology. For those of you tuning in, thank you all very much for tuning in. If you're new around here and you want to subscribe, click that subscribe button down below for more World of Warcraft content. Also, of course, like the video if you are new around here, and of course share the content on social media if you can. And if you have any questions and anything that I didn't cover, go ahead and post in the comment section down below. Let's get to it. Now, before we go ahead and start going over the Soulbinding talent trees, Soulbinding is a new system of progression in Shadowlands expansion in which players who join a covenant will be able to bind themselves to one of its members, sharing some of their power through an artifact-like talent tree. Each of the different covenants has 3 options as stated before to go ahead and choose from, with each soulbind offering different bonuses for a total of 12 different trees of progression across the 4 different covenants. Conduits also add further customization to these soulbind trees, which we will be going over in a different video. The first covenant we're going to be going over is the Necrolords. We have 3 soulbinding members: 1 Plague Deviser Merileth, 2 Ameni, and 3 Bonesmith Ymir. We're going to be going over Ameni first, with the first option and the first soulbind ability being Lead by Example. Decimating Bolt increases your primary stat by 5% and up to 4 nearby allies' primary stat by up to 2%. You gain 2% also additional primary stat for each ally affected. This is given to you in the first tier row. Next up, as you can see, we have 2 blank options to go ahead and choose from. Double Sword, which is a potency conduit, which affects damaging abilities. The Shield, which affects your your defensive cooldown, and your defensive abilities, as well as your healing abilities. And last but not least, you also have later down in this one is the Lightning Bolt, which is the more finesse and niche option, which is going to be your finesse conduits. But in this second tier row, we have options for potency and endurance. We're going to be going over the conduit options and conduits for warlocks in a different video and in a different guide, so stay tuned for that. However, on the third tier, we got Ameni's Magnificent Skin. Fleshcraft increases your maximum health by 5% for 30 seconds, or Ameni's Ambulatory Flesh. You may channel Fleshcraft while moving. Now, out of these 2, I'd prefer Ameni's Magnificent Skin. However, we're going to be forced into Ameni's Magnificent Skin anyways, because we want to go ahead as a warlock and choose that potency conduit. So anyways, we're going to be selecting Ameni's Magnificent Skin, which is great. Next up, we're forced into a finesse conduit. So now we have one of 2 options here. We have Cartilaginous Legs. After taking falling damage, the health loss becomes a shield lasting 30 seconds. Or Hearth Kidney Stone. You may attune your Hearth Kidney Stone to any resting location and return to it. 12-hour cooldown, reduced by 5 minutes every killing blow. Out of these 2 options, I absolutely love Hearth Kidney Stone, and it doesn't affect any other route going on further. So let's go ahead and select that. Next up, we are forced into an Endurance Conduit, and then we have an option of either a Potency, Endurance, or a Finesse Conduit. However, let's look at the final options for Ameni. We have Gristled Toes, movement speed increased by 3% for every nearby enemy, up to 15%. Gnashing Chompers, gain 3% haste for 10 seconds after defeating an enemy, up to 15%. Sulfuric Emission. When reduced below 20% health, your fear nearby enemies for 4.5 seconds may only occur once per 60 seconds. When it comes to these options, Sulfuric Emission is great for PvP. Gnashing Chompers is great for any situation, and it is probably the best of the 3 options. However, because of a Potency Conduit being so strong, we're going to go ahead and select that Potency Conduit, which leads us into Gristled Toes, which again is a Soulbind ability that does movement speed increased by 3% for every nearby enemy, up to 15%, which is also very, very beneficial in PvE combat. Whether it's raiding, mythics, hell, even in PvP is a very, very beneficial ability, but because of that Potency Conduit being so strong, it outweighs the stronger ability at the end being Gnashing Chompers. Next up, we're going to be going over Plague Deviser Merileth. Volatile Solvent, which is a soulbind ability using fleshcraft where nearby corpses consumes their essence completely, granting a benefit based on the creature's type, which is a very, very cool and unique ability to have. Next up, right away, we have an option for a potency, endurance, and a finesse conduit. So let's go ahead and skip that tier and go ahead and select and see what we have next. Ooze's Frictionless Coating. When reduced below 50% health, Ooze courses over you, granting you a shield for 15% of the maximum health for 10 seconds. May only occur once per 30 seconds. Travel with Bloop. While standing still, you slowly build stacks of Bloop's Wonderlust. At 5 stacks, your movement speed is increased by 10% for 2 minutes. And Plaguey's Preemptive Strike. Your first strike or spell cast on an enemy increases your damage done to them by 10% for 10 seconds to limits of 1. When it comes to these three options, Plaguey's Preemptive Strike is definitely the best of the three when it comes to damage. However, that comes from a Finesse Conduit. Now, that's not always going to be the case to where a Potency Conduit beats a Finesse Conduit, meaning you're not always going to want to go with a Potency Conduit because some of these talents are more beneficial than a Potency Conduit. However, in this case, Plaguey's Preemptive Strike does not beat the abilities that you can get from a Potency Conduit, which is definitely going to be more beneficial, leading us into Ooze's Frictionless Coating, which isn't too bad, and it is a nice defensive cooldown to have when reduced below 50% health. Next up, we're forced into an Endurance Conduit, and then we have one of two options. Kevin's Keyring allows opening of locks that require up to 60 skill once every 12 hours. Each 1 second spent channeling Fleshcraft reduces Kevin's Keyring cooldown by 60 minutes, or Plagueborn Cleansing Slime, approximately 1 procs per minute. Defeating enemies has a chance to deploy a Plagueborn Cleansing Slime, which improves the remaining durability of your armor. Out of these two options, I'm going to go ahead and hit up Plagueborn, but out of the two, they're very, very niche, so go ahead and select which benefits you. Great Potency Conduit, which is going to be next, and then we have an Endurance or a Finesse Conduit leading us into Ultimate Form. While channeling Fleshcraft, you are immune to crowd control, and you regenerate 2% health every 1 second. If you finish the full channel, you gain 4 seconds of crowd control immunity, during which you regenerate 2% health every 1 second. So it's optional for you to go ahead and select Endurance or Finesse, depending on which conduit is going to be more benefit to your playstyle. Whether you're PvP related, you're most likely going to want to hit up a Endurance Conduit. However, sometimes, yes, of course, the Finesse Conduits are nice and beneficial as well. So again, depending on your playstyle, select either Endurance or Finesse. But again, we're not going deep into details on conduits, which ones are better and which ones are worse. So I'm just going to go ahead and select the Finesse, and that leads us into Ultimate Form, which gives us our talent choices for Plague Divisor Merileth. Last but not least, for the Necrolord is Bonesmith Nirmir. We've got the first option of Forgeborn Reveries, which is a soulbind ability. Your primary stat and armor are increased by 1% for each enchantment on your armor up to 3%. Upon death, your armor anchors your soul, allowing you to fight for an additional 10 seconds. During this time, your damage and healing done is reduced by 50% and you cannot receive healing. We are now given a Potency or an Endurance option. Let's go ahead and skip those and see what's next. Resourceful Fleshcrafting. Defeating an enemy reduces Fleshcraft's cooldown by 1 second. Serrated Spalders inflict shadow damage to your attacker over 5 seconds when hit at melee range. We're going to go ahead and select this Potency Conduit because it does outweigh the benefits from Serrated Spalders. And then we're going to be given Resourceful Fleshcrafting, leading us into a Finesse Conduit. One of two options, Runeforged Spurs. Mounted movement speed is increased by 5%. If attacked while mounted, mounted movement speed is increased by an additional 10% for 30 seconds. Or Bonesmith's Satchel. You have a chance to obtain a satchel of Bonesmith's preferred ore and gems when you kill an enemy that yields experience or honor. Choose either or, but I'm going to go ahead and hit up with Bonesmith's Satchel. We're now forced into an Endurance Conduit, and then we have one of three: Potency, Endurance, or Finesse. Let's select the last options of Hirmir's Arsenal Gore Stompers. Damaging or healing a target below 35% grants you 35% increased movement speed for 5 seconds. After you start moving, may only occur once per minute. Hirmir's Arsenal, Morrow Gemstone. After landing 10 crit strikes, you gain 18% increased chance to crit for 10 seconds. May only occur once per 60 seconds. And Hirmir's Arsenal Ravenous Pendant. Defeating an enemy restores 3% of your maximum health every 6 seconds for 6 seconds. Stacking up to 5 times. Adding stacks refreshes duration. So when it comes to these three options, of course, damaging wise, Marrow Gemstone is the best option. PvP wise, defensive cooldown wise, Ravenous Pendant is very, very great. However, because of all these three options, we do have a potency conduit that leads us into Gore Stompers. This potency conduit is definitely going to be more beneficial than the other two that come from Endurance and Finesse. So we're going to hit up the potency conduit, and also that's going to give us Gore Stompers. Again, damaging or healing a target below 35% grants you 35% increased movement speed, which is very, very beneficial in all shapes and forms of combat. For 5 seconds after you start moving, may only occur once per minute, leading us to the final finish of Bones. The next covenant we're going to be getting into is the Night Phase, starting off with Korain, with the other two options being Dreamweaver and Naya. Korain's first Soulbind ability is Wild Hunt Tactics. Your damage to targets above 75% health and healing to targets below 35% health is increased by 10%. When your spells and abilities are enhanced this way, you gain 15% increase in movement speed for 5 seconds. Very beneficial. Now we have the options of a potency and an endurance conduit, so let's skip that and see what's in tier 3. Horn of the Wild Hunt. Soul Shape increases movement speed of allies within 40 yards by 10%. Wild Hunt's Charge. While out of combat, your Soul Shape teleport becomes a charge, stunning your target for 5 seconds and ending your Soul Shape. So out of these two options, yes, of course, Wild Hunt's Charge would be very nice in PvP. You can go ahead and equip that and use that with many versatile movement abilities that Warlocks have, such as Demonic Teleport and Gateways. However, when it comes to pure strict damage, you're going to want to go with the Potency Conduit option, which is going to lead us into Horn of the Wild Hunt, which is also very beneficial in PvP and PvE combat. Leading us into a Finesse Conduit, we now have one of two options. Vorkai Sharpening Techniques, your weapon takes no durability damage, and Get in Formation, your mounted movement speed is increased by 5%, allies behind you within 4 yards also gain this benefit. I'm going to go ahead and select Get in Formation. However, one of the two options is beneficial, so go ahead and select whichever one you want. Next up, we got an Endurance Conduit, leading us into a Potency, Endurance, and a Finesse Conduit choice. So let's skip that row and move on to the final one. Face your foes. When in front of your target, your spells and abilities decrease the damage they inflict on you by 3% for 2 seconds. First Strike. Damaging an enemy before they damage you increases your chance to crit by 25% for 5 seconds. And Hold the Line. After standing still for 5 seconds, you take 15% less physical damage until you move. Just to give you a heads up, out of these three options, you're going to want to go ahead and go with the Potency Conduit, which leads you into Face Your Foes, because out of the Endurance and Finesse leading into First Strike and Hold the Line, damaging wise, they're not really beneficial. So given that, the Potency Conduit leading into Face Your Foes is the most beneficial option of choice, given that our Korain talent tree. Next up, we've got Dreamweaver, starting off with the Soulbind ability of Pod Tender. When you take damage that would kill you, instead rejuvenate within a Wild Seed, regaining 30% of HP over 10 seconds. If the Wild Seed takes more than a specific amount of damage during this time, you also die. This effect may occur once every 10 minutes. Now we have an Endurance and a Finesse option, so you can go ahead and select either or. Again, we'll be getting into conduits in a different video. I'm going to be selecting the Finesse option, leading us into a Potency Conduit. We now have one of three options here. Soothing Voice. When your roots, stuns, and incapacitation class effects expire or are dispelled, your target's movement speed is reduced by 90%, decaying rapidly over 2 seconds. Social Butterfly. When at least 2 allies are within 8 yards, your versatility increases by 3% for 5 seconds. When this effect expires, 2 nearby allies gain 33% of this effect for 5 seconds before passing it back to you. And last but not least, Empowered Chrysalis. 10% of your overhealing received or done remains as a shield on a target up to 10% of the caster's health lasting for 5 seconds. Empowered Chrysalis is not really an option for us. When it comes to the other two, Social Butterfly is beneficial in certain situations. However, because of this, Soothing Voice does lead to a Potency Conduit, which outweighs the other two options. So let's go ahead and select Soothing Voice into a Potency Conduit, leads us into an Endurance Conduit, and one of two options, Fairy Dust. When falling further than 20 yards, Fairy Dust slows your fall for the next 30 seconds. Cannot occur more than once every minute. Somnambulist. After spending 60 seconds in a rested area, you gain 20% increase in movement speed for 30 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and select one of these two options, which I'm going to be going with Somnambulist. You can go ahead and select Fairy Dust as well if you want to go ahead and do so. Both of them are very niche abilities. Leading us to the final Soulbind ability, Field of Blossoms. Soul Rot puts flowers at your feet. For 10 times 1 second, that increases your haste by 12%. while you stand within them, which is very beneficial, and it is a great stat to have for a Warlock. Last but not least, we've got Naya for the Night Fae, Grove Invigoration, approximately 2 procs per minute. Healing or dealing damage has a chance to grant you a stack of Redirected Anima. Redirected Anima increases your maximum health by 1% and your mastery by 25 for 30 seconds, and stacks do overlap. Soul Rot grants you stacks of Redirected Anima. You got a Potency and an Endurance Conduit, leading us into Run Without Tiring. While in Soul Shape, you regenerate 5% of your maximum health every 3 seconds. Or Stay on the Move. Soul Shape's cooldown is reduced by 15 seconds, and defeating an enemy reduces Soul Shape's cooldown by 1 second. Out of these 2 options, I'd rather Run Without Tiring. Leading us with that Potency Conduit anyways is the benefit way to go. So let's go ahead and select the Potency. Let's go ahead and select the Run. We got a Finesse Conduit. Now we have one of 2 options. Nature's Splendor. You have a chance to obtain leather, meat, and fish when you kill an enemy that yields experience or honor. And in Swift Patrol, movement speed increased by 20% for 2 minutes after defeating an enemy. Combat cancels this effect. So you have one of 2 options to go ahead and select from, but I'm going to go ahead and stay with Nature's Splendor. We now have an Endurance Conduit, leading us into an Endurance, a Potency, and a Finesse Conduit. Usually it's the other way around. Usually Potency is at the far left, but we'll stick with this one, and let's see what the ending tools are going to be. Naya's Tools Burr. Your damaging attacks and spells have a chance to toss Naya's spiked burrs under your target. The burrs latch onto the first enemy to cross them, reducing movement speed by 20% and inflicting nature damage over 6 seconds. Naya's Tools Poison. Your interrupts apply a poison basically to your target, dealing a certain amount of nature damage over 30 seconds. Targets with Naya's Paralytic Poison take an additional nature damage if interrupted once more. And Naya's Tools Herbs. Your healing spells and abilities have a chance to apply Naya's Invigorating Herbs, increasing the target's haste by 5% for 10 seconds. So this option with the Finesse Conduit is not really a go-to for Warlocks. We can either have the Endurance or the Potency Conduit, and these last remaining options aren't really beneficial anyways. So go ahead and select that Potency Conduit, leading us into Naya's Tools Poison. We now have the Kyrian Covenant, starting off with Pelagos. First Soulbind ability is Combat Meditation. Scoring Tiff increases your mastery by 350 for 10 times 1 second, and occasionally expels Sorrowful Memories. Walking through Sorrowful Memories extends the effect by 3 times 1 second. Combat Meditation may only occur once every minute. Leading us into, right away, an option of 3 conduits: Potency, Endurance, and Finesse. So let's skip that tier and move on to 3, Focusing Mantra. Defeating an enemy lowers the cooldown of your File of Serenity by 1 second. Road of Trials. Defeating an enemy grants you 10% movement speed for 20 seconds. This effect is increased if defeating a powerful enemy. And File of Serenity from File of Patience heals you for 35% additional health, but all of its healing is done over 10 seconds. So that is a heal over time ability from File of Patience. Defeating an enemy grants you 10% movement speed, so this is a movement speed ability, and it is increased after defeating a powerful enemy, which is Road of Trials, and defeating an enemy lowers the cooldown of your File of Serenity by 1 second, which is Focusing Mantra. So out of these 3 options, they're very, very niche and don't really affect you as a Warlock too much, so you're definitely going to want to hit up the Potency Conduit, which leads you into Focusing Mantra, leading you into an Endurance Conduit. Now we have one of 2 options. Bond of Friendship. Defeating an enemy reduces the cooldown of your Steward's non-file services by 30 seconds, or Cleansed Vestments. You have a chance to obtain Cleansed Cloth and enchantment materials when you kill an enemy that yields experience or honor. Choose one of the 2 because they don't benefit you as a Warlock too much. I'm going to be going with Cleansed Vestments, leading us into a Potency Conduit. Now we have the choice of an Endurance or a Finesse option, but again, choose which is going to fit your playstyle, and I do strongly suggest you check out our Conduit guide once released. We're just going to go ahead and select the Finesse option, which leads us into the last talent, the last Soulbind ability, Let Go of the Past. Using a spell or ability that reduces your magic damage taken by 1% for 6 seconds, using another spell or ability increases this amount by 1% when it is not a repeat of the previous spell or ability, stacking up to 3%. Next up we got Clea. Valiant Strikes, Soulbind ability. Your crit strikes grant you stacks of Valiant Strikes up to 20. If a nearby party member drops below 50% health, you consume these stacks to heal them for 1% of their maximum health per stack. After healing this way, you may not benefit from Valiant Strikes for 1 minute. Leading us into a Potency and an Endurance Conduit, let's move on to Tier 3, Mentorship. While above 90% health, you increase nearby party members' maximum health by 5%. And Ascendant File. File of Serenity renders you immune to curse, disease, poison, and bleed effects for 8 seconds. Out of these two options, as a DPS, you want to go with the Potency Conduit, leading us into Mentorship, which was my favorite of the two options, leading us into a Finesse Conduit. Now we have two options, Cleansing Rites. After 5 seconds out of combat, gain a shield for 10% of your maximum health. Ever forward, while above 90% health, your mounted movement speed is increased by 10%. I'm going to go ahead and select Cleansing Rites, but again, based on your playstyle. However, Cleansing Rites does have an effect in combat, which is very, very nice. Let's go ahead and select the Endurance Conduit, leading us into the Potency, Endurance, and Finesse options. We now have Bearer's Pursuit. Your damaging spells and abilities have a chance to decrease your target's movement speed by 45% for 20 seconds. Pointed Courage. Chance to crit strike is increased by 1% for every nearby enemy or ally, up to 5%. And Resonant Accolades. When receiving healing while above 70% health or healing an ally that's above 70% health, 4% of the healing done is repeated on the target over 5 seconds. So, out of these options, Resonant Accolades isn't really beneficial. It is also a Finesse Conduit. When it comes to Pointed Courage, it is the better of the three options when it comes to damage. However, it does not beat a Potency Conduit's option. So we're going to be going with the Potency Conduit, leading us into Bearer's Pursuit. Last but not least, for the Kyrian, we've got Forge Light. Bronze Call to Action. After using 90 damaging or healing spells and abilities, your next spell or ability summons Brawn, who knocks enemies back on arrival and then attacks and heals your targets for 30 seconds. We've got a Potency and an Endurance Conduit, leading us to Forge Light Filter. When reduced below 35% health, your File of Serenity automatically heals you and consumes a charge. Charged additive. File of Serenity also knocks nearby enemies away from you. Out of these two options, none of them benefit on damage. And also, of course, that Potency Conduit is the option to go. So we're going to go with Forge Light Filter, leading us into a Finesse Conduit. One of two options, Regenerating Materials. Casting or receiving healing has a chance to improve the remaining durability of your armor. And Resilient Plumage. Fall damage decreased by 20%. And after taking fall damage, damage you take is reduced by 20% for 15 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and select Regenerating Materials out of those two options. I don't plan on falling too much, but again, if you do, go ahead and select Resilient Plumage. Endurance Conduit choice into a Potency, Endurance, and a Finesse option, leading us to Soulsteel Clamps. After 5 seconds standing still, incoming stun and incapacitated durations are reduced by 30%. Lasts for 5 seconds once you start moving. Hammer of Genesis, damaging a new enemy grants you 3% haste for 10 seconds, stacks up to 5. And Sparkling Drift Globe Core, when reduced below 35% health, you stun nearby enemies for 3 seconds. This effect may only occur once every 45 seconds. The best option for us is Hammer of Genesis. However, it again, as always, does not beat a Potency Conduit, which is going to end up finishing us off with Soulsteel Clamps. And last but not least, with the Covenants, we have 3 more options within the Venthyr. We've got Thrill Seeker with Nausea. While in combat, you gain a stack of Thrill Seeker every 2 seconds, or 4 stacks on killing an enemy. At 40 stacks, Thrill Seeker is consumed to grant you Euphoria, increasing your haste by 20% for 10 seconds. Thrill Seeker decays rapidly while you are not in combat. We now have an option of a Potency and an Endurance Conduit. At Tier 3, Agent of Chaos. Door of Shadows disorients all nearby enemies at the target location for 6 seconds when you appear, or Fancy Footwork. Door of Shadows increases your movement speed by 40%, decaying over 6 seconds. Definitely going to want to go ahead and hit up the Potency Conduit, which leads us into Agent of Chaos and a Finesse option of choice. We are now given Friends in Low Places. You loot 20% more infused rubies and dredgers throughout Ravendreth. Offer you an expanded selection of goods. We're now given an Endurance Conduit. And of course, Potency, Endurance, and Finesse, leading us to the final options of Familiar Predicaments. The duration of incoming interrupts, snares, and roots effects are reduced by 25%. Exacting Preparation requires Death Knights. The benefits of Well-Fed, Flask, and Weapon Enchants effects are increased by 20%. And last but not least, Dauntless Duelist. The first enemy you damage in combat is marked as your adversary. You deal 3% more damage to them, and they deal 1.5% less damage to you. You may also only have one adversary at a time. So, out of these 3 options, that Potency Conduit is going to be leading us into Familiar Predicaments because, again, the Potency Conduit does outweigh the effects and benefits from Exacting Preparation and Dauntless Duelist. Next up, Theotar the Mad Duke. Soothing Shade. approximately 1 proc per minute. Your spells and abilities have a chance to call Tubbins and Gubbins to your side for 12 seconds. Paracells in hand, standing in the shaded area grants you 525 mastery. Next up, we have an Endurance and a Finesse Conduit option. Watch Your Shoes, Door of Shadows, frees you from roots and snares. Or Leisurely Gait, Door of Shadows has 2 charges, but its cooldown is increased by 30 seconds. I'm going to be selecting the Finesse option because I do prefer the Finesse Conduit with the combination of Leisurely Gait, leading us to a Potency Conduit, which is definitely what we need. Life of the Party. During the Ember Court, your guests gain additional happiness for each event completed. When the court concludes, the effects of any decree bestowed upon you are increased. Exquisite Ingredients. You have a chance to obtain an assortment of flavorful herbs and beverages when you kill an enemy that yields experience or honor. I'm going to go ahead and select Exquisite Ingredients, however you can choose either or, leading us to an Endurance Conduit, leading us now to a Potency, an Endurance, and a Finesse Conduit. Giving us the last options of Token of Appreciation, grants you a shield that absorbs damage to allies who aid you with healing or beneficial magic effects. You will only shield each ally once every 20 seconds. Refined Palate. The effects of combat potions last 100% to 200% longer. And Wasteland Propriety. Impending Catastrophe signals the start of tea time, granting 6% versatility to you and 3% versatility to up to 4 nearby allies. Just to give you a heads up, out of these 3 options, again, the Potency Conduit choice is going to be the more beneficial for you for damage-wise, which leads you into Token of Appreciation, which is a nice shield that absorbs damage. And of course, Refined Palate is very, very nice to have, especially in raids as well as Mythic Plus dungeons. But Wasteland Proprietary is probably the best when it comes to PvP options, so don't be afraid to go ahead and go that route with Finesse. However, if you're going for straight damage, Potency into Token of Appreciation. Last but not least, the 12th Soulbind, General Draven. Service in Stone, damage taken below 40% health is reduced by 10%. Upon death, you leave a stone husk behind, which shatters after 3 seconds, inflicting 100% of your maximum health and damage split among nearby enemies, and healing for 100% of your maximum health split among nearby enemies. Leading us into a Endurance and Potency, an Endurance and a Finesse Conduit option. Tier 3 moves 1. When a nearby ally gains temporary increased movement speed, you also gain the benefit up to 30% for 8 seconds. Or Enduring Gloom. Door of Shadows grants you a shield that absorbs damage equal to 15% of your maximum health, lasts 8 seconds. You can go ahead and select either or option which benefits your playstyle. I'm going to be going Finesse into Enduring Gloom, which leads us into a Potency Conduit, which is well needed. Unbreakable Body. Your equipment takes 50% less durability damage from death. And Expedition Leader. Leaving a resting area increases your mount speed by 10%, and your out of combat regeneration by 100%, lasts 10 minutes, and completing a world quest refreshes this duration. Out of these 2 options, none of them benefit you damage-wise and as a Warlock, so go ahead and select whichever one you want. I'm going to go with Expedition Leader, leading us into an Endurance Conduit, and leading us into the final options of Potency, Endurance, and Finesse. So, we've got Hold Your Ground. Standing still for at least 4 seconds grants you 10% increased stamina and 4% increased healing done. This effect persists for 6 seconds after you start moving. Superior Tactics. Successfully interrupting an enemy or dispelling an ally increases your crit by 10% for 10 seconds. This effect may occur only once every 30 seconds. And Built for War. While you're above 80% health, you gain 1% of that primary stat every 3 seconds, stacking up to 4 times. If you fall below 50% health, this effect is lost. Built for War is very, very weak when it comes to any benefits. And then, of course, Superior Tactics does not outweigh a Potency benefit. So you're going to want to go with the Potency benefit, leading you into the last Soulbind ability of Hold Your Ground. Now that we've gone through every single talent tree for all of the 12 Soulbinds, I'm now going to go ahead and give you guys, in order, which Soulbinds are the best for your class. And I'm also just going to go ahead and give you all of them in a rundown anyways, depending on which Covenant you end up selecting. If you haven't watched our Covenant video or our Covenant guide, I strongly suggest you do so. On this first one, we're going to be starting off with the Affliction Warlocks of choice. When it comes to the Covenant options, you were either going to go Night Fate or Kyrian as the top options that were given in my guide. Necrolord and Venthyr were not beneficial at all for Affliction Warlocks. However, if you did choose Night Fae, Korain, Dreamweaver, and Naya is the order for the Night Fae Soulbinds. Pelagos, Clea, and Forgelight are the order for the Kyrian Soulbinds. As for the Necrolords, I went with Ameni, Plague, and Bonesmith, and then for the Venthyr, it was Nausea, Theotar, and Draven. But again, when it comes to your Covenant options as an Affliction Warlock, you were either going to go Night Fae or Kyrian, and then for those, you were going to be going for the Night Fae, either Korain in order, Dreamweaver, and Naya, or for the Kyrian, Pelagos, Clea, and Forgelight. For the Destruction Warlock, your best Covenant option was Kyrian. So with the 3 Soulbinds in order, Pelagos, Clea, and Forgelight were your options to go. Necrolord was your second best Covenant choice for a Destruction Warlock. So you had Ameni, Plague, and Bonesmith in that order. And then of course at 3, you had Night Fae, Korain, Dreamweaver, and Naya in that order. And last but not least, your worst Covenant option for a Destruction Warlock was the Venthyr, which is Nausea, Theotar, and then Draven, with your Soulbinds in that order. Last but not least, we have Demonology Warlocks. The best Covenant, and easily the best Covenant of choice, was the Necrolords, and in this order, your Soulbinds would be Ameni, Plague, and then Bonesmith. Night Fae is your second best option for your Covenant as a Demonology Warlock. We have Korain, Dreamweaver, and then Naya. And then of course with the Kyrian as our third best option, we had Pelagos, Clea, and Forgelight. And last but not least, we had the Venthyr at the bottom of our Covenant options of choice, Nausea, Theotar, and then Draven. For those of you that tuned in, thank you all very much for tuning in. If you have any questions, please just go ahead and post in the comment section down below. Again, subscribe, it'd be greatly appreciated. We have a lot more World of Warcraft content coming at you. We still have 2 more Warlock guides that I know of that I'm going to be making very, very soon, which are going to be covering the Conduits, which are a part of this video, as well as legendary options. So stay tuned for those videos to become released as well. Again, for those of you that tuned in, thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll catch you all next time.